Today you're going to be speaking with Elise Forward. She is going to talk about 5 key supply chain management tools that you're going to need. There's a lot of quality work that revolves around supply chain management. Many companies rely on very rigorous evaluations to approve appliers or suppliers, but sometimes the volume of those documents can be very overwhelming. So this presentation will offer you all 5 key things that you will want to add to your supply chain document list and give your company the best bang for the buck. So I'd like to welcome Elise. She is the founder of Forward Food Solutions. Elise is the president and principal consultant for the Forward Food Solutions. The company is dedicated to helping food manufacturers, distributors, and importers update and strengthen the food safety and quality systems. Elise uses her production, distribution, and supply chain experience to help companies in both the international and domestic markets. She's a member of the IAFP, ASQ, IFT, and MWFPA. It's a lot of acronyms. So everybody please give a round of applause for Elise Forward.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here and excited to talk to you about supply chain work. I've been doing this for a long time. Maybe not as long as some other people here, but you know, I think we always learn through trials and tribulations. And so I want to share with you some things that I found are, you know, after doing it for a long time, really what I kind of focus on and where I can find the pitfalls the fastest. All right, so why do we talk about supply chains? Well, one of the first reasons is first of all, we've been relying on supply chains for a long time in the food industry, more so than in other industries. When I did a lot of my quality training, I did it with people in the automotive industry. And so they test all their parts. They can test the metal, and they can still use it. Well, when we test our food, and if we test it at statistically significant amounts, we have to destroy our food. We're destroying all of our products. So we have been relying on supply chains for a long time, but there hasn't been this huge focus on them as there is now. And the first reason is you know, this focus of the change in the regulations. So both the preventive controls rule and the foreign supplier verification program rules require strong knowledge on supply chains with regard to controlling hazards. So here we are. This has become very important, and you know, it's a risk now if we don't do a good job at it. So we have that regulatory risk if we don't tackle it appropriately and have enough information and be able to control our information that way. But we also have the business risk. We all know what happened to Peanut Corporation of America and many other people when they chose to not do the right thing. And you know, and then that personal risk that's there. So when we're signing off on this paperwork that we think the supplier's okay, and let's say they're not, we carry that weight on our shoulders too. The other thing I think about is that we always have, back to my quality training again, we talked about the cost of quality. And there's technically 4 that I learned about, but I can only ever remember 3 because 2 overlapped. But there's the preventive costs, then there's your sampling and testing costs. And like I said, you know, that can be tough in the food industry. And then there's the cost to fix something, okay? And those are our recalls and the corrective actions. The preventive costs are always cheaper, hands down. And so this really is, you know, it's hard for us to justify to our VPs and our presidents and all that, CEOs, why this is so important. And the purchasing team too, that just says, here, this company is cheaper, we want to buy from these people. But it isn't necessarily in the long run, because if you buy from the one that's not as good, and then you have an issue and you spend time and days and man-hour and money fixing it, you're gonna be in the hole. All right, so the first thing I like to start with is the specifications and product information. This is really important in my opinion. All right, so what is top left corner? What do we usually find in a product spec? Chemical, microbiological, analytical information, organoleptic, those are the physical characteristics. So, think about this. You're bringing in a new product, you have an idea of what you want to bring in. This is the first place you want to look to make sure it matches up with what you're expecting. Okay? I commonly find something off in some kind of paperwork, right? And I'm sure you guys can say the same thing. And it's not because someone's intentionally doing something wrong necessarily, but it's because there's human error. There was one time where I was, very established, well-known company, okay? And they were doing the supply chain work for powdered products. So low in moisture, right? Well, it appears that some of their specs had at one time had solids on it, and the other ones had moisture on it. And then they transitioned them all to say solids. So everything should be, or moisture, I can't remember which one. But let's say it was all solid, so it should be greater than 95%. Well, this one said moisture greater than 95%. Simple error, I had to write them and say, I don't think this is right. Now, if I signed off that it was approved or there was an issue, it was a glaring error. It's not that necessarily a big deal unless there's additional issues later on. And then you can kind of put these together and go, do they really have the oversight? So even looking at the product spec and looking at this is really important. There's also things like the labeling information, whether that's the nutritional or allergen. Use that also. If, let's say, they're making a low sodium claim on packaging, or that there shouldn't be sodium in it, and their nutritional information says that there is, that would be a red flag. Or if you're anticipating that they're controlling one of their hazards by using a salt addition to lower the water activity and change that, that would be important too. So that's another one that's important. So, some of these you need to use as pieces to pull it all together. Most companies don't do actual nutritional testing. A lot of companies use databases. So again, it's a great potential for error. You always want to look at your packaging and storage or packaging requirements too. The same type of product can be packaged in multiple different ways. So, and when you change your packaging, of course, you can change your hazards. I think about like coconut milk. It can come canned. It can come refrigerated. They can dry it and make it powder. There's all different kinds of things that they can do. But they can always call it coconut milk. Storage and transportation. Again, is this being, let's say you have a refrigerated item. Is it refrigerated for quality or food safety? And making sure you understand that, because of course you're going to be part of that supply chain. I look closely at the product descriptions. It's always nice to have a written product description because again, sometimes there's information in there that's not anywhere else. I found ingredients in there. They will list allergens in there. And just a better description of what that product is. So it's always good information to look at. And I know everybody knows what all this is, but I've often seen companies or people go through product specs pretty quickly instead of really trying to memorize them because you're going to use it later on in other information and connect the dots. The other thing that I think is really important to really understand right away is what are the relevant regulations. My favorite product specs list those because then I know that they're already know what regulations they fall under. Sometimes there may be a grass ruling, a specific way to label it, and declare it in the labeling regs. That's always nice to have right there, because then you can go right there and say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't. And because you may need to use that in your package. Ingredients and processing aids, obviously we know those. Sometimes it's hard to get processing aids out of companies, and I totally understand that. But at the same time, that can also be helpful to just make sure that there's no hidden allergens. And of course, shelf life. Again, not usually a big issue, but I have caught issues where shelf life was listed as 3 months and I was expecting 18 months. And it's kind of like, well, we got to figure this out here. Why are you doing this? So, you know, looking at the product specs by themselves, you know, I think a lot of times we don't think of how important those are. But I think about them as they really feed into the rest of everything, and they're a really good starting point. The next thing is allergen information. Most companies deal with allergens. Or if they don't, they're really trying to avoid them. So the important thing is, you know, what kind of allergens are on their line in the same plant, and more importantly, how are they controlling for them? So at the bottom of every allergen form that I send out, I ask, you know, what do you do to control allergens? And I'm looking for things like that they have labeling controls, that they have sanitation controls, that they have scheduling controls, so that way I know that they have an understanding. If they say nothing, or, you know, in training too, you know, or they leave it blank, that to me is a whole. But I need that, not only that allergen information as to what's there, but also how are they controlling it, what are they doing about it. Sorry about that. Black coding information. Again, this one is sometimes a gold mine and sometimes a dud. Sometimes you'll get in there coded in the, especially for some ingredients, production date, production line. And if you know the production line, because then later on you look at their process flow charts, you can say, oh, and you can catch if it's on the wrong line, because maybe the other line has different allergens. So that's, you know, that's something that, again, sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's just nice to have that information so that you can look back. Any of the extra certs that require extra traceability, organic, kosher, maybe halal, non-GMO. I've caught company filled out their allergen form, told me they had certain things in the plant, and they forgot stuff. And I caught it because on their kosher, they had all this listed out and with whatever, with nuts, and they missed one of their nuts. So, not common, but use that tool, especially if a company is, you know, they're advertising, hey, we have a certification, ask for it, and say, we may choose to gather this certificate, or to go for this certification in the future, but I'd like to get this now just to show this, because it's great if they're carrying that too. Because it means they're going through extra audits. They have more traceability audits every year for every one of those certifications that they add. So why do I start here? The #1 reason I start here is because that information is all pretty much publicly available. That's all what companies consider their sales information. And I can take that and use that as my groundwork for building an analysis of their product. So they are readily and willing giving me this information. Okay, so then it's going to lead me into the food safety information. So the first thing I'm going to do with all that information that I just gathered is complete a hazard analysis. Okay, so I'm guessing most of you are PCQIs in here, or there's a good handful, and if you aren't, you know someone. And they've talked about this. So, you know, when you're doing supply chain work, you can always use your supplier's hazard analysis. evaluating them. So I actually need to know if they did it right. So I like to do my own hazard analysis so that you can start off by using the guidance documents for the preventive control rules. Because the theory or the thoughts with guidance is that you should be using those, and if you're deviating from them, you need someone from PCQI to sign off on it and to justify it. So FDA has already kind of given us some great groundwork and framework. So if we have these products, we can do these hazard analysis and have some idea of what our suppliers should be controlling for. That isn't the only thing we should be using for a hazard analysis, but that's great start. So then when I start looking and I ask them for their food safety information, I want to look again. Okay, what does their hazard analysis include? I mean, again, you'll see that this top left corner, a lot of is going to mimic what was on that product spec. So their ingredients and processing aids, the labeling information, those packaging and storage requirements, transportation, the product description. The things I've added here is the process flow chart and the process description. And depending on the company, depending on my relationship with them, how long I've known them, sometimes I ask for that right away when I ask for everything else. Sometimes I wait and ask for it secondly. Depends on how long I've known them, because I understand right away with the process flow chart, most companies don't want to share that. And I always ask for the preventive control for their CCPs on. The reason though I ask for the process description is, again, sometimes things that come up in that flow chart aren't necessarily represented on the flow chart, but the process description, the written process description, gives better explanation. So again, I need to look at both of them. Not all companies have them, but it's always nice to see. So then I need to evaluate their hazard analysis. And this, this is still where there's a bulk of the work coming in, okay? Because we need to make sure that they are adequately controlling the hazards. And how are they doing that? So that leads us to the food safety plan. Have they correctly identified which regulations they fall under? Also, they need to clearly indicate who is controlling the hazard, because it may be their supplier, maybe their producer, and also, and this is really getting in the weeds, but have they done their validation? Especially for those process controls. Sanitation allergen, not required, always good to have. But if you even just ask a company, have you done this? And if they give you a yes or no, you're one step ahead of where you were. Maybe you don't want to necessarily see them quite yet. Maybe you need to wait for a little bit to ask them for that. But, if they say yes, we've done validation. And you could also ask, what were the results? And have the... Yeah.
What are some key criteria you're looking for in the validation?
When I look for validation, I look for what did they test for, and then again, it should match up with my hazard analysis as to the hazards. So are they testing against what they determined in their hazard analysis, and does that match mine? And then what were the results? Did they do it internally? Did they do it externally? Did they have some scientific data? Because FDA has now said that you can use published papers as long as it's exactly the same scenario. So if I had a company that sent me paperwork that said, well, we're just basing it off of this, then I'd say, well, I need to see something more. And I think this is an area for growth for many companies, is to really get this validation paperwork in place, unless, some companies are there. But some companies are still struggling with that. And then I like to look at the details of their controls. So what CCPs do they have for process preventive controls? What are they doing in their sanitation program? And this one, for a long time, I would just ask the company for their environmental monitoring program. this would give me a very good understanding of, do they understand zones? What are they testing? And I'd ask, all open-ended questions. So, do you do testing in zone 1? And same for each of the zones. What do you test for? Organisms. Okay. What surfaces do you test for in this zone? What do you do with positive results? When you have it, and what do you do with the product that was made? The answers you get really can tell, or you can tell, do they understand sanitation? Because if they understand environmental monitoring, they will understand the role of sanitation. I happened to sit in a class with a master sanitarian for a very large company. And so I asked her the question too. I said, because she manages sanitation around the world, many places. I said, what do you do? And she says, we also look at the master sanitation schedule. And I thought that's a pretty good way too. So, depending on your product and the hazard analysis you did, and what controls and how this is going into your facility and what you're doing with it, you may also want to look at their sanitation schedule and say, are they doing the right thing? How often are they doing it? Because you may say, hey, we don't think you should be cleaning XYZ once a month. We need it. When you're processing our product, we need you to clean right beforehand. In companies, that would be a reasonable request, I think. We need to clean right. Not, you need to change your whole thing necessarily for every company, but, and she also said she walked into a facility and they were, they were cleaning production equipment. On the same equipment, they were cleaning floor mats. And there was a debate, is this okay? And so, she said, we're not going to do that with this. So, these things happen. So this is why we look at this type of thing and we kind of really trying to understand what the practices are there. Not that everything's going to be bad, but it may be, again, whose name am I signing to this? That would be mine. I have to sign off on this. And then what do they do for supply chain programs? Okay, they're going to have a supplier unless you're dealing with the farm and the grower. So, but how are they qualifying? What are they doing? And so, I've seen all sizes and shapes again. When GFSI audits required and on-site audits, and we do an on-site audit, till we get C of A's. All right? And I always get a little concerned when we have C of A's, and we'll talk about that coming up here. But, so what are they doing? The last piece in this is the requirement. Okay? We all know it's required. Do they test it? How often do they test it? And kind of what do they do? And most companies have it, so that's good. It's kind of like one of the last things to finish out that circle. All right, so the benefits of looking at all this information. And this is where, like I said, it gets in the weeds, and there's a lot of information here, but this allows us compliance with regulation. The other thing is I know I sleep better at night if I find a supplier that sends me back all this information that says, no problem, here you go, and I look at it and I'm like, they are doing the right thing. I sleep good that night. Just about every night afterwards. And it also means if they don't, I may not sleep well for many nights until I know that we got it fixed and they're willing to work with me. It also lets us know what issues we need to be worried about. So like I said, maybe they have not a very strong supply chain program and that there's a hazard that, maybe that I think is a greater hazard because I know what I'm doing in my processing and production environment. And then we may be inheriting that from one of their suppliers. So I want to make sure that I understand how they fit into what I'm doing in my facility. All right, number 3, audits. And I'm talking here about our GFSI audits, our third-party quality audits, but also our second-party audits where that is maybe a customer going in, or your facility, you hire an auditor to go in, regulatory audit, it is not their internal audit. Because there's no independence. Now keep in mind, you don't want just anybody doing that audit. That person needs to not only be trained in food safety, but also to be trained in auditing. Okay? And then what was audited? So this is another piece that I've seen a lot of companies, they even sat in an audit one time with the FDA, and they said, oh, you have a GFSI audit, you're good. And I went, what? Kept my mouth shut. Like, okay. I heard later that that was not what we're supposed to say. But you know, what is actually being audited? Because, you know, the GFSI audits, most companies still don't have the addendum on yet that covers the FSMA regulations. And so, you know, you need to review them and think about what's in the content of that audit, and then also, what did the auditor write about? Does it actually match what you're seeing in the rest of their food safety systems? Okay. I've caught errors on audits where I had written back to company and I said, hey, what about this? And what it was there was 2 facilities, and the same auditor did both facilities. And so, you know, I'm starting to look, and there's a lot of repetition here. And all of a sudden, there wasn't. And I said, what happened? Like, I can't remember, it was like customer complaints or non-performances, and there was a discrepancy. And they said, auditor error. And I thought, yep, no problem, because that seemed the most logical sense. And which of us is going to correct our auditor? No one. So, it wasn't a big issue, and they had the thing I was looking for was a logical explanation. They gave me one. So, and they didn't hesitate either. That's the other thing. When you get one of these and someone hesitates, that was when you can raise your eyebrows and go, something's not adding up. All right, sampling and testing. Again, I talked about how most companies rely on those C of A's when we get there, okay, or when we've gotten food in the past. I love sampling and testing. I started out working in a lab, in a food production lab. So I fully understand the value of testing, but I also understand how I can really skew my results if I take the sample at a different spot. So, it's really important to understand what you're testing for and how you're testing. So, is this how you're doing your testing? Is he qualified? Or she? What was his procedures? I will tell you, I can tell it's early because I used this in a different talk in the afternoon, and I got a lot more chuckles. Thank you. I have friends that tell me I can never tell a joke, but I am pretty funny if I do all my dry humor, so this is as good as it gets. So, what do I look for in testing? And this is, again, you can get deep in the weeds, but it depends, again, as to your hazard analysis, what you are focusing on. You know, if you choose to rely on your C of A's, then this is the area you want to say we need to know more information about, okay? So let me see how to explain this. This is, sometimes if you're looking for an analytical issue or you're trying to do an analytical test, and maybe, if you're metering ingredient in, okay? If you take samples, let's say 100 samples throughout, and you composite them, you may never catch the spike because you're taking a little bit from each, and so it averages that out. So your sampling plan needs to really be considerate of the production process. Okay? So continuous processes are different than batch processes, and you want to see that there's different sampling methods for that. For microbiological testing, you always want to have the test pull at the worst possible point. I don't want the cleanest sample, I want the dirtiest sample. Think about your environmental monitoring programs. You're testing your drains for a reason. You want to find it. I also want to find it in my product. So that maybe when you start up, because it's on the clean lines, and maybe there was some water caught or cleaning solution caught, sanitizing solution in the lines, and it's sat for a while. It's after maintenance shutdowns. But these are the things that you want to consider. So if we're relying on our C of A's, how do they do the sampling? When were they taken? So that's where I don't necessarily rely on my C of A's as much. I like to see them. I always want to know what a company is testing for. Does it match up with my spec? Are they using valid methods? Are they testing in-house or on an outside lab? Does the lab, whatever lab it is, carry any certifications? So I think this is really important. And again, you know, these are, you know, top 5 things that you can use, but every person in here, when you go back, you're going to pick out which ones you're going to use, and you're going to say, I'm going to focus on this because this is what we do. And maybe we can strengthen this in this area. So, you know, sampling and testing products, if you ask about that, some companies understand and some companies don't. And so again, that's, if it's something that you feel is really important, you can communicate with them. All right, the last one, relationships and communication. So in some ways, this is number 1, but I had to arbitrarily put things in, so this is number 5. But really, this is really important to me because I worked internationally, and so language can be a big issue. There's another funny. This is what happens if you don't have good communication. So is there a language issue? But also, you only have one person that the whole company talks to. So, you know, and I'm sure you can all think of this. There's some companies that you work with, there's the salesperson, they take care of everything. And then there's other companies where the salesperson or your purchasing person talks to their salesperson. Your QA teams know each other, and your logistics teams know each other. Which one do you like better? That salesperson has to be really, really, really good for me to really like them. Otherwise, I really like having multiple points of contact in a company. It becomes stronger because you have more, it's kind of like the more threads. If one person goes on vacation, you're not left scrambling. Somebody else knows what's going on. The other thing is what does their organizational chart look like? Not that you necessarily have to do it, but I've been sent those, which is really kind of fun. Because then I can see, hey, this person that I'm talking to, yes, they directly report, or no, they don't directly report to the head of the company. You know, but it's very helpful for me to know. I have a client right now where almost every email that we work with is copied to the head of this area, to the secretary for the head of this company is copied on everything that we do for supply chain work. And I'm like, woo! Because it means that we have a direct line of communication all the way up the chain. All right, so in review, these are the top 5 things. Specifications and product information. And we use that to create the hazard analysis. Okay? And that's really important. Okay? And then when we look at their food safety systems, we really want to understand the preventive controls and critical control points. How are they controlling the hazards? And who is controlling the hazards? So for their process PCs and their CCPs, have they done any validation work? Is that really important to the hazard and what we're doing? That may be. If it's a supply chain program that they're relying on super heavily, and then we need to rely on, then we'd look deeper into that. Sanitation programs, again, very much a monitoring program, and allergen. Excuse me. Next, the quality and food safety audit. If they don't have one, first of all, it's required for any Dakota hazards, so then it becomes on you to get one for them, or to encourage them heavily to do that. Excuse me. Allergies. Next is the sampling and testing program. And again, we just talked about that. Especially if they're like the C of A's or you have to. And the last is relationships and communication. So, geez, my voice just gave out, so I guess that must be my cue. So, thank you guys very much. We are at booth 907. So if you have any, we can, I don't know, do we have time for questions now, or are we doing our time? A few minutes. Okay, take some questions now.
Does anybody have any questions?
Or real life horror stories? Oh, come on, right up here. Okay, do you have one? She asked if I had any stories I could share.
I was just asking whether she had any stories that she can.
Well, I forgot to tell you one story about allergen labeling. Okay, so my family and myself are dairy free. Okay, we all react pretty well to dairy. So I picked up some, and then there's some of us that don't do gluten very well. No celiacs, but everyone feels better without it. So I was like, well, great. So we picked up these crackers, and they said they were vegan. So vegan, no dairy, no eggs, all that. So vegan are usually really safe. And I read the ingredients. And because I do that. And so great, we're good, brought them home. Was snacking on them, they're really good. Had never seen this brand before. And as I was looking at them yesterday, I saw underneath that they had an allergen call out. This contains allergens or whatever. And I thought, okay, well, I thought I'd seen soy in there or something, but I never look at that much because it's not required and it's not regulated. The advisory labeling underneath. And, but it says contains milk. And I went, what? Because I've been eating them, and I can tell. And I was like, there's no milk in that. And then it said, colon, made on shared equipment. And I was like, that is not cool. They have that messed up. And so I picked up the phone to call their number, and I went, that this number is not listed. And I went, uh-oh, because that's also not a good sign either. That's not allowed either. So then I have to follow up with their website yet and tell them. But again, who am I, a little consumer, telling them their QA people, this is wrong. Because usually you have to go through customer service, and they just, if you tell them, yeah, I do labeling for a living, and I do, this stuff, they're like, huh? So that's fun. Even in the grocery store, I find these things. I would say audits, if you can get on site at a facility, if there's things that you're feeling are uncomfortable with, go on site. Visiting a facility, actually being there, especially if you're working with overseas companies, if you make the effort to come travel to them, it is a big deal for most companies. They may clean the plant for you very nicely. It may not look like that all the time, but it may. some companies do keep a very clean plant and some don't. But you will also get more information from them too. And there's a greater level of commitment that you'll find.
Any other questions? Any other stories? Going once? Going twice? Well, everybody, could you please give Elise a big round of applause?